check. We can go ahead and start the recording. We'll get going. Okay, welcome everyone. Today is our first kickoff of our 2017-2018 kind of academic year at Highroad U. We started this a couple of years ago, and it is our educational outreach to the association community. We're in a really privileged position to be able to be partnered with ASAE and be able to be a CAE provider. So if you guys are all joining live to get those credits, you know they're self-reported, but we can always attest that you're actually here, and we're delighted that you've joined us today. If you're not doing that for your CAE credit, we're still delighted that you're here, and we're very excited because what we have planned, we run Highroad U as in kind of in a very semester format. So each month we pick a topic, we delve into the topic in a couple different ways, and then we go on to really start to keep building on to our fundamental knowledge of digital marketing. Like I said, we've done it for a couple years, and so we have quite a bit of content at highroadu.com. And what's awesome to see about it is because we started early, we've really been seeing this hockey stick growth curve in the amount of people who are attending and consuming our content, because so much is changing in our association industry and so much is pushing towards digital. So we're very excited. If you don't know Highroad Solution, we're a digital agency for associations, and we put in marketing automation platforms, we implement them, and we provide services on digital marketing primarily around growth and engagement. So it's a super exciting time in our association world for people like me who've been in digital marketing for quite a while. So today, we're going to take an interesting kind of spin on a traditional topic, but one that we've been really kind of researching, realizing that something kind of kicked off last year at ASE's Membership and Marketing Conference. I was asked to be on a pre-conference panel, and we had a really wonderful panel, and the topic was really on building modern marketing teams and really acknowledging that something has changed, and we need to really start getting our hands and heads around it to say, you know, we got to do something different. You know, at Highroad, we call it kind of save the pandas. It's like, if we keep operating in the same way we've been operating as association, the same time frame, the same products, the same techniques that we've been using, we might go extinct. That might be a little bit extreme, but for some of our organizations, we've seen that happen. We've seen some go out of business. We've seen some get bought up. We've seen some just dissolve and disband. So what we want to do, though, is really say, hey, let's not be on the, you know, on the laggard side of adoption. Let's really help to move associations really forward, because at the end of the day in digital marketing, it all comes down to data. And you know who has all the data compared to a corporation versus an association? Association or a society wins almost every time, hands down. So if we need to really move associations and leapfrog over what many corporates are doing, because we have such a wealth of data and we're so close to our customer and they've wanted to be with us. So for us, we get very pumped up about this conversation, and all of our kind of work is around, you know, that genre of thinking about how do we work to have this association? What does an association look like? How are we going to grow? How are we going to do all these things really, really well, and kind of take everything that's working already and either kind of digitize it, or take what's not working and move it around, or like, let's evolve, or let's figure out what this new thing is. But I think what everybody can agree on, a couple of years ago, people were still saying, oh, you know, we probably need to grow. Now people are like, we definitely have a problem. We definitely need to do something else. And now they're on to what should we do, if not already starting to implement. And that whole process called digital transformation. All right, so what does it have to do with budgets, roadmaps, and Martech project management? So one of the aspects that I thought we would start with in September, as we kind of go into like a back to school mode, you know, when you go back to school, or when you're, you know, if you remember back to college and things like that, you got your syllabus, you got your entire plan for the semester, you got all your reading materials, and you got all of these ways that you go through. And one of the things that's really struck me in kind of the getting back to this, you know, a schedule If you have kids in school, you know, there's summertime and then there's school time, and it's just a different schedule, and everything starts to line up and get very structured. And one of the things that, starting again back at that membership and marketing conference that I've been working on, and we've been working with at Highroad internally, is really, again, evolving. And some of the highlights and some of the research I've been doing over the summer has very much been involved. Now, obviously, we consult with a lot of clients, and we're doing a lot around budgeting and road mapping, because so many organizations want to go through digital transformation. So many of them want to get to marketing automation or into a more data-driven kind of structure. And the big thing that has struck me is that, well, two things. One, the way that people have been budgeting for these things isn't quite working anymore. They're not really sure what should be in their budget. We actually do a State of Digital Marketing Associations research report. We've done that for 4 years now, and you can see over time the budgets have barely changed, and the budgets are what are very traditional. The website takes up all the budget, the email marketing system takes up the budget, right? And print takes up the budget. And you start looking for digital advertising or digital other tools to help with growth, and they're really hard to find because all the money's been taken up. So we've been on maintenance budgets. So how do we start thinking about our budgets in a different way? Because these organizations are coming to me saying, Suzanne, we need to grow. Well, a growth budget and a maintenance budget are two very different things. Right? A maintenance budget might be 3 to 5% of, you know, your annual revenue. A growth budget might be more like 7 to 14%, 15 and up percentage, depending on how fast you want to go to market. So we've been working with organizations during, during the prospecting process to say, let's budget together, because we got to, I get it. You got to plan for this. Nothing just, falls from the sky in the association world. You got to have a budget. So something's changed. We need to do something. The second part of it is I started realizing also that something was happening here with organizations in trying to get things done, right? Why were all the projects failing? And oftentimes, I'm talking from a technology project standpoint, right? So why do these things take so long? They go over budget, they're not meeting the timelines. What's happening? Something also is happening there on the execution project management part. Something's not quite right on the budget part. Something's not right also on being able to roadmap to these big goals, right? So I thought today, let's put it on the table and let's talk about it, because there's something that the corporates have started achieving that they might be bringing into your organization, or that we can leverage and be able to understand there's other ways to do this, but start critically assessing our own organization from kind of a standpoint of, are we being optimized, right? And so we need to also change our mindset from being maintenance to get out of maintenance and saying we have to get into performance mode. Two very different concepts right there. Many associations, whether they know it or not, they have a cultural kind of psyche of being defensive and in maintenance mode. In maintenance mode, you're trying to kind of keep everything kind of in stasis and kind of the same, right? In performance mode, you're in a continuous improvement mindset. And so to grow, one, we have to be in a performance mindset, and we have to understand that piece of it, et cetera, and we have to understand new pieces. So let's talk today about all of that kind of bucket of goodness and kind of just get thinking. And it's a little bit more of a strategic kind of session today, but I'm so interested to get feedback about, did this pique your interest, and how much is this resonating with you about what's happening in your own organization? So our outline for what we're going to do in today's class, if you will, is we're going to talk a little bit about how are people working in today's world. Like, let's get real about it. How are we working? How are we thinking about our marketing efforts? I'm going to talk about our specific, about marketing as a department, but in reality, you could apply it to any department. If you right now are on the call and you're part of a publications department or an events department or a certification department, it's equally applicable. How do we think of our goals? How do we budget, project management, and how do we roadmap to get to these big kind of goals, okay? And we're going to try to tackle all of that and have a little bit of fun while doing it. So the big question I told you I wanted to pose to you is, why don't projects get done? And again, everything I'm saying is just conjecture. It's from me kind of sitting around and observing. I've been back in the association industry purely for the last 4.5 years now. So this is 4.5 years of just observation. And then my previous, positions I've had, as part of my job was in this market and some others, but really 4.5 years of like intently focused in on looking at organizations and understanding them. And we happen at Highroad, our clients tend to be the kind of the early adopters on many things. So we have kind of a petri dish because we can find out, well, how come some of the organizations can change, like how they get that done. And so I'm constantly asking our clients and like our heads of marketing and heads of technology within our own clients, how did you get the money for that? How did you structure your department? How do you get these things done, right? Because I think that's some of the underpinnings behind the scene we could all really leverage, right? So why don't projects get done, and how do people work in today's world? And this is a little bit specific to associations, but I think you'll get the gist, and you can tell me if any of this resonates with you, afterwards, however you'd like to contact me. So a couple of things that hopefully hit home. So if you think about today's work world and workforce and how we are, a couple of key facts. First time in the history of mankind, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 generations in the workforce, right? We've got so many people out there that are coming in that we've got a huge, combination of factors, okay? So first and foremost, we got to acknowledge we got all these kinds of factors coming into the workforce, and nobody has the right formula. And what we do know is we need to stop kind of trying to generationally duke it out amongst each other and have one generation win. It's just not going to happen. They're fundamentally so different between, all the generations that we got to put that aside and say, look, we got to find a way to have some sort of fusion culture that it's going to work and have a framework that we can all work from. So that we have to acknowledge that one. So my point being is, look at the kids, look up for your computer for a second, look at the kids who are on the laptop. And here's my take-home message to you, right? And here's the thing, if you didn't train from the get-go the employee in front of you or your staff member or your teammate at work, and you didn't train them specifically from day one, then you better approach it like, not that they're children and they're infantile, but that you can't assume that they know what you know. You can't assume. You would never do that to a child and come in and punish the child if they didn't act appropriately, if you didn't first set the expectations as to what it is that they're supposed to do and not do, right? And many of the results I've seen of why projects don't get done is because there's this huge gap in understanding. There's all these assumptions being made, and then people are getting very political about it because they think well, she's doing that and he's not doing that, and they won't deliver this, and they don't want us to have marketing automation, and there's all this infighting. But there's so much of it, if you step back, it's because of generational differences, or there's so many assumptions between all of this that we assume that the woman next to me knows what I'm thinking and knows my time frame is her time frame and the whole thing. So my whole point is, unless you train them yourself, we got to get rid of all those assumptions about our coworkers. And I'd say our vendor partners and all of it. We have to start getting very explicit about, and I know it takes time. Somebody's rolling their eyes right now why do we have to tell them? Shouldn't they know it? You know what? The thing is, they don't know it. No, get over it. Get over it. Nobody knows it. Nobody knows what's normal. We've got a fusion of cultures, generations, ethnicities, you name it, right? It's all in a big bundle. So we can't assume it. We have to outline and be clear about it. So unless you raised them yourself, just get rid of the assumptions and say, look, we got to get a new set of frameworks about how we're going to operate as an organization. A couple other things that happen all the time why projects don't get done is a lot of times what we're doing is we're throwing the die and we're going on totally guessing about project timelines, initiatives, what we need. We're relying on, word of mouth. We're relying on some salesperson who's telling us from a vendor. We don't really have enough maybe knowledge, and we're kind of rolling the die. We're throwing out campaigns. We're saying, let's call it $10,000 and, throw stuff out into direct mail and email, and just we're kind of hoping it works, right? So we're not basing it on data, right? We have some data, but we don't probably have enough data yet to really be focused. And so what we need to focus in on is, how do we get that data? Because we got to get the data so we can make data-driven decisions, so we're not rolling the die and really ostensibly kind of misuse of funds, right? We want the highest return we can possibly get on our association's budgets. So if we're going to spend money, we need to really be able to prove where the money went. And if that's the case, then probably we need to say, great, probably having antiquated software that does one aspect but not all of it, or like we have to VPN in to some other place to do this, and we don't have the login and only one person has it, and we don't have the right technology, and I can't do that, I can't access it from home, et cetera, becomes a huge problem, right? And what we see, since we put in marketing automation systems and other digital marketing systems, is right that there's a lot of outdated technology out there. And that also is like a pain point, because maybe the association management system you have was never intended to really be like interoperable with other systems. And that's a problem, because in the world of digital, I need to track you everywhere you go. So I got to be able to connect these systems together. That becomes a big blocking point for why projects don't get done. It could just be you don't have the tools or the right technology, the right actual, resources to actually do it correctly, right? There's also things like, one of my favorites is very specific about sort of associations, is that there's a kind of teleworking culture that's just become so dominant in associations that it actually throws off all the project planning and schedules. Things like not having Fridays in the summer that you work, right? And then trying to explain why you don't get a project done, but not taking that into account. Or the fact that there's maybe, the salary has never historically, they weren't paying maybe market value for your role, so you got more time off, and then that time off is taken at all the different times of everybody else. So like, or one person, and then there's teleworking, like you have so many days as a privilege, you get to work at home. So Mary works home at Tuesdays, but Phil works home on Fridays, and they're never in the office, so it's hard to have a meeting where they're together, and then one person's logging in, it's only by conference call, and then you can't get stuff done. It's an impediment to being fast. And what we know about associations versus the corporate market is they are years behind. Not like 1 year, like close to 10 years behind in being able to be as fast as we need to be now in being agile in the market. Okay, so that becomes a real impediment, right? Why don't more people have the right technology so they can use, they can be live video to each other? Why aren't they mobile? Why aren't they being outfitted with the tools to be able to work from anywhere they are? Right? So we have to look at that, because when you look at why a project doesn't get done, all these factors actually really do come into play. Some other things that won't be a shock to you. There's just not enough time. Many organizations have a 35-hour work week, and people don't work extra. But if you're competing with a corporate market where you work until the work gets done, that's an impediment, right? So we've put these artificial constraints in sometimes over the last kind of maybe 2 decades as benefits that are now becoming blocking points. And now the big question is, what do you do? Do you take it away? Do you restructure it? Those are things that are very interesting conversations. But if we're saying, why aren't we digitally transforming as fast? Why aren't we going fast enough? Well, these are some of the inherent problems, right? Associations are known for meetings. We have meetings about meetings, and so oftentimes what happens when I look at our clients' schedules is they have so many meetings, and there's no time actually in the day to actually do the work. So therefore, the actual meeting time gets, the actual doing time of what came out of the meeting gets pushed further and further and further along, and the things just kind of sit. They kind of hang on the vine, right? Then we have kind of other things that happen, like hurricanes, right? And things that you just can't plan for. But we have these factors, including, back to my generational one of the gal over there with the clocks, we don't all operate on the same time frame anymore. Right? And I think many managers have not been trained from a global perspective of project management. Many managers, a lot of associations are very diverse, right? We're a very inclusive community. So we're diverse, which means that if you've got people on your team that are not, they're not all coming from the same background, they're not all coming from the same state, they have different, again, ethnicities, different, points of origin, right? Different kinds of things. You need to know that, because what you mean by I need it right away might be completely different to that person. And again, I go back to, if you didn't raise the people yourself, you got to reset expectations on timing and tools and how you're supposed to work and even how to work within a meeting, how to work together. I think a lot of us assume, and we have a huge millennial influx, right? Hopefully everybody knows millennials are the biggest part of the workforce now. It happened in 2015. They're the majority. we make all these assumptions that they know how to do all these things, like work in groups and work this way and work that way and understand how to work telecommuting and understand all this stuff. And that might be a very big assumption. Just like we might assume the millennials understand what we mean by this, right? And then we get very frustrated when we say, where is the work? But we didn't explicitly give the definition, and they look helplessly and they're like, nobody told me. And you're like, why should I have to tell you? And we've got all sorts of interesting interpersonal dynamics, and we have to kind of reset the stage. These are all these factors, and I'm sure there's 100 more, but the big ones for why big projects don't get done in association world, I think I've pretty much gotten a good cover on them, and you can, again, write me and let me know if I'm accurate, right? So it's a big problem, specifically because associations, the way we've structured ourselves in the last couple of years, has not been set up for growth, right? And growth needs to be dedicated and focused, etc. And the last piece of why projects often don't get done in the association world is something called KYP. You got to know your personnel, because in order to grow, that's a mindset. And if you've got somebody who's a maintenance mindset, who is very risk averse, who just wants to clock in every day, do the same set of tasks, right? And they want to get out of there to get on with some other part of their life. If that's how they're oriented, there's nothing wrong with that. But if we're talking about growth, they don't fit into the model. And that's often a big piece, that you just don't have the right skill set anymore. You don't have the right people that are pumped up about coming in and working long hours because it's change and they love change and they're curious and they're like, what about this? And they want to grow and learn. It's kind of like a different specialty. Just like many times the people that are growth people, they're not your maintenance people. Once you got something grow, it's grown and you build, they're builders. And once it's built, they're out of there. They got to leave the organization. They're not interested in a 20-year career. They need to leave because they need to go somewhere else and build. And once it gets to maintenance level, another group of people come in who are experts at maintenance and honing, and then they take over until the next growth cycle, right? And that's not something I feel like we talk about a lot, but KYP is a very critical thing, because I'm going to staff a team to get a project done, and I don't put the right connected people together, the right mix, right? It's going to hang on the vine. It's never going to get done, right? If I have one person who won't do anything, or they're not willing to change, or also what often happens in associations is the department wants to adopt a new piece of technology, they want to adopt a new way of doing things, and there's one person there who is not on board. And so everybody spends all of their time trying to bring that person around, and they suck up all the energy, they suck up all the time, and months and months and months go by, right? And it's a conundrum. It's a conundrum because it's tough, because now you're stopping the growth of the organization and the momentum, and there's a real truth to building a team and getting that energy and the momentum going. So these are kind of like underlying factors about why projects don't get done. And obviously I'm building up to what can we use nowadays, or just thinking points to say what can work and how do we need to approach it. So one of the ways I want to do that is to be able to say, so often also, the way all of us have been going, the majority of the time, is we are going from one thing to one, it's activity to activity to activity to activity, right? And we're so heads down and absorbed in what we have to get done in the next 5 minutes that oftentimes it's very difficult for people, not so much the executives, because they have sometimes, just more vision and step back, and more so when they're asked to talk about it at maybe a more comprehensive level, but a real challenge, if you're not in that role, or if you're never asked to do that, to step back from your work for a second and imagine if you have to tell somebody else, somebody who doesn't know anything about, internal to your organization, what are the kind of main things that you do, not your job, not your role, but your whole, say, department, right? Your whole department, or your whole organization. If you had to boil it down into 3 things that you do, always the 3-prong approach, right? Can you do it? Because what that does is that allows you to step back and say, fundamentally, what are we doing? And what I find so much as we go out and we consult, we do a lot around specifically digital marketing, which again, I just told you, for most organizations, that is a massive amount of time and money spent on email, which is unbelievable to me still in 2017. There's so many better ways to do it more, effectively. But instead what we're doing is we're so heads down and every day churning out email. We're focused on producing email. Like that's what we're focused in on. We're focused in on, I got to cut and paste and test it and do that, or I got to write the copy and get it in. And your focus is on sending email, not the actual bigger piece, which is what you're trying to do with email. So what I'm saying is, if you can step back and look at your marketing efforts and say, what are we fundamentally trying to do, right? Let's step back for a second, people. Fundamentally, what are we trying to do? And if I'm going to use my example, this is my actual example at Highroad of our marketing efforts. I say, look, group, let's not forget, I know we're all blogging and tweeting and putting out email and we're, creating whatever, all these different, we have projects and we're answering questions, etc. But fundamentally, step back. Why are we doing this? Because we do three things. We do new lead generation to acquire new customers, right? We do partner lead generation to work with our affiliate and vendors to do what? Acquire new customers. And then we also do client communications and lead generation so we can do retention and we can upsell, okay? And so always we come back to these three tenets of what are we actually trying to do with all of this little activity. Otherwise, what tends to happen is that you have people on your team who are just like hamsters on the wheel, hamsters, and they get literal, right? And then they get literal and they're not thinking the bigger picture, which is a constant improvement picture. One is maintenance, tactical. Every day I come in, I just send out email and I'm frenetic in doing it. Tactical, maintenance. Step back and constantly come back to the big three things we're trying to actually do and the meaning of it, far more strategic, growth. Okay, so we have to constantly step back and say, hold on a second, am I in a maintenance mindset, right, or am I in a growth mindset? If I'm in a growth mindset, I got to understand how the little tasks fit into these bigger things and never lose sight of that, okay? And when you know it, if you look at that, everything we're doing here is about generating leads, for the most part, right? Everything is about how can I go out there and we can do more growth. Right? And this is what and I'm bringing this up because our clients keep asking us, how do we do this? And I say, what do you want to focus on? We got to grow, but we have all this engagement too. Okay, look, that's fine, but we got to break those two things apart. Again, engagement or retention is one set of strategies and approaches, okay? Growth is another. Don't put them together. Don't put the maintenance and the growth together. If we have a membership, often I say, great, do you want to grow new members or do you want to upsell within your current members and get them to buy more, get them to adopt more, get them to engage more, participate more, etc. Right? Usually it's it's about growing the non-dues revenue within the current membership base. And of course the answer is both. I want to grow new members and yes, I want to sell a lot more to my current member base. Okay, great, but then we have to say, if that's the case, both of those are lead generating activities. So we have lead gen for new prospects who don't know us and we want to make them a member or a customer, and then we have lead gen for being able to grow inside of our current member base. That's all lead gen, okay? We can't separate it. Let's call it what it is. We're trying to sell to people. It's a sales enablement. It's marketing at its finest. It's all lead gen. And then we have another bucket, which is a smaller one, which is probably about 25%, which is on true engagement, true retention, right? And that's where I'm going to say that's really the communications piece of what we're doing. The rest of it, for most organizations, we are trying to soften up the idea that we're selling back into people. But now with corporates rushing into the association market, we don't need to soften it. That's what we're doing, which means that we got to get good at sales enablement. We got to get really good at marketing, right? And understanding the differences and why that's different than communication, right? So you can see those kind of marketing efforts. So every time I'm now being able to roll out something to my team, we have to go back and they need to fundamentally understand how this thing fits in, right? Like, why are we doing it? Because otherwise they're just like, oh, we have a new event coming up, X, Y, and Z. And like, you're missing the bigger point, right? And the bigger point is not just understanding it, it's understanding how to craft it for that message so it's going to actually bring us a return, okay? So I challenge you, can you step back? Now, again, those are my three. you also might have 3 buckets, or you might have some combination of buckets. So aside from just acquisition, affiliate vendor relations, and retention upsell, you might have a bucket like fundamentally the 3 things we do is advocacy, industry research, and we have a fundraising arm. So those are some things that might be on your your 3 pillars, right? All right, so we've got that. We got to be able to step back, and again, if we're going to be in growth mindset and we're going to think about how we're going to grow and how we're going to operate in today's fast-paced world with all these things happening, we also have to probably rethink our goals. And there's a concept that probably many of you were taught, like you need to have what's called a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And I'm saying, I think that's probably run its course, because this big, hairy, audacious goal is like, one day we're going to be the only place, on the planet Earth and maybe 4 other planets where you can get certification, networking, and educational opportunities for our specific profession, right? It's so far out there, and the problem is all of us have lost our attention span. We've lost our endurance in many cases. We've lost so much of this that everything becomes bite-sized. Like that's pretty much what we can now handle as humans, right? So a lot of people know the statistic that the average goldfish attention span is 8 seconds, and the average adult is now 4 seconds, right? So I mean, if we have less attention span than a goldfish, and now we're talking about a big, hairy, audacious goal where we're going to be the dominant force on the planet for all things for my profession, you can see how we have a mismatch, because it's so overwhelming. You just ignore it. It's like too long of a time period for any of us to be able to really kind of go through it. If you start looking, every way that we've been kind of socialized as a consumer has become shorter and shorter and shorter, right? We've gone from annual contracts to month contracts. We think in terms of what we have to pay out each month now. Our lease, our cell phone plan, everything's been broken down to months. Now you're seeing it broken down even shorter than that. Okay, and so it's because we're kind of losing our endurance and our ability to sit through sessions and things like that. And that's why you see it in event planning all the time. It's like a big debate. Do you have a long deep dive session, or you have quick little ignite sessions and things like that? And it's largely because of this kind of need. So goal setting, therefore, it's really hard to have this. Your goal cannot be something like, my goal is to implement the 3-year plan. Like that doesn't make a goal. Or our goal is digital transformation. We want to grow by 20%. One of my 2 top favorites is I have many clients who say, our goal is, we need to do personalization. Like that's the goal, right? I mean, like, what is that? How do you even attack that one? I mean, I'd be overwhelmed too. Or like, we need to use more automation. Those are digital transformation, personalization, and automation are definitely the top 3 right now that I hear, 5 times and twice on Sunday during the week. You guys all remember, or kind of, if you've ever seen kind of project management stuff, what goals are, they need to be what's called SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, results focused, and time bound. And I bring up time bound with a lot of little asterisks because I want to come back to the meaning of time. And it's a very esoteric point, but I think it's something we really need to think about, because the meaning of time, and therefore our understanding of time, and therefore our understanding of how other people are supposed to treat time, is worth another pause, right? Because at the same, we have everything speeding up, and we have a whole group of people on the earth who have instant access or near instant access to information, et cetera, and yet we still have these we have, again, like I said, multiple generations walking the earth together. There's regional differences. It could be that, I'm making someone is coming from one part of the planet and I'm coming from other parts, and like they just don't have the same cadence of the speed of where they're coming from. There's regional differences. There's cultural differences, again, with the association world and having really diverse teams. Most of the people, again, is one of the questions I ask all the time to my association clients is, do you get global training? Do you get kind of this kind of, it's not even like HR management training so much, it's like L staff need it, right? Is everybody now getting a new set of training about understanding cultural differences and things like that? You're like, why isn't he answering it? It's like, well, maybe in his culture, he would never make a response and say, I'm working on it, I'll get back to you. Like that would have been like a no-no. and you're mad because you're thinking, why is this guy not responding to me? But in his culture, it's like the only time you would respond back is if you had the full and complete answer, right? And all sorts of bad things can happen if you don't come from, again, one solid framework of understanding these kinds of things. And I find time to be the one criteria that we all, right? It's the one thing we all have in common, right? It's the one thing that we can all set rules around. And it's the one thing that is incredibly finite, and we just, right, we cannot get it back. So we have to be masters of time at this point. And there is no room, if I'm growing, to sit around and do anything. There's no time to fret or frenzy or pout or do any of this emotional stuff that has so long kind of internally been issues and caused political strife. But, you know, that's something that is it's a luxury. And you know, when you get that luxury, oftentimes when you're in maintenance mode. When you're in maintenance mode, you know, there's time to sit there and think about these things and get moany and groany, etc. If you're in growth mode, time's your enemy, right? Time's your enemy. It's tick-tock. As a marketer, you're hearing tick-tock. You're thinking someone else right now is buying a certification product that I could be selling them that's coming from a for-profit that's trying to now kind of like eat our lunch, right? And we need to figure that out. So that kind of piece of the time is really worth thinking about when you're talking about how do we now readjust ourselves to go to market in a faster way, right? And we have to get it right internally before we can get it right with our members. So same thing, some members expect you to have certain types of response times and maybe you don't have that, or there's a mismatch. So you probably, once you get it internally, you need to also kind of have a meaning of time example across your membership as a whole. How fast you're going to respond. So people are setting expectations. It's also one of those big things, super important between national to chapter or affiliate. Everybody's working on a standard meaning of time that we can agree to. Time obviously has other factors too, like there's things that are just, you know, so industry specific, right? Some industries are inherently much faster than other industries. That's just how it is, right? If I'm in retail or I'm in fashion, if I'm in, you know, entertainment, it's a much faster pace than maybe some, you know, large scale industrial manufacturing types of industries. So understanding that too, and understanding as more people come into your association, they may not know that. And you might need to let them know that about what is the cadence that's appropriate. So the meaning of time is a very different thing. Again, just pushing on the very different premises as we build up to talking about putting together, again, the budgets and the project management piece. We have to remember, again, just generationally, that we have different premises. So people have been trained differently to how to solve their own problems, or how to solve problems, I guess I should say. They've been trained incredibly different when it comes to time and how to create solutions, right? So I'm showing you kind of three kind of typical pictures you would see that would represent generations. So baby boomers there on the left, many of them have come through. I'm not a baby boomer, I'll say that. So many of them have come through, and they've had the luxury, in my opinion, because I'm Gen X and we didn't have this, of having corporate training, having really nice structured programs that taught you how to be in the workforce, that taught you standards, that taught you kind of these, you know, what you should and should not do, and techniques for working within groups, and how to structure meetings and committees, and all of how to run a conference call, and how do you address the crowd. Lots and lots of formalized training, right? So then that, you know, that's one kind of whole thing. So if you've that on your team, you know, you're coming from a whole precept that you've been taught in maybe a more formalized, structured way of learning, etc. You get into the middle one, which is Gen X, which is where I fit. You know, we're the little generation, and you got the latchkey kids. We didn't get the benefit of all that corporate training. We didn't. All of a sudden, there was no money. It was a recession. Everybody cut all that budget. We came into the workforce. It was like, hey, man, figure it out. You know, and what we did, we were used to coming home by ourselves with a key and figuring out what we're doing for whatever. No one was creating play dates and snacks and everything else for us. So when we came in and we figured it out. So we're a generation known for coming in and being independent and coming in and figuring it out. And being able to do that, we also came in right during everything moving over into the internet. So then we became this bridge generation, and we were heavily relied on to be able to technologically savvy and bring that up to speed, etc. Right? So Gen X, if you've got that as a boss or they're your team, etc., they have their own set of premises. Like, you should be able to go figure it out. Go research it yourself. Stop asking me, what are you doing here? What do you mean? I'm not going to map it out for you. There's all sorts of stuff there that happens within teams, right? So we're talking about putting a project plan together and how we're going to make assets, meaning resources of people, move effectively through it. We got to keep these things in mind, because we have to agree how we're going to work together. And then finally, we've got our millennials. Millennials as a generation have grown up being incredibly scheduled, right? Incredibly scheduled. Everything is organized. It's, everything is done. They're, the parents, they're known for having the helicopter parents. They went from activity to activity to activity. Everything's been outlined. Everything's been kind of put together for them. And so if you put them into an environment where you just say, hi, come in and figure it out, they're not going to do well. And you just give a project plan and says, hey, here's what you need to do. All you need to do is, we need to grow by 20%. They might not be set up for success because they're not coming from this same framework about how to solve the problems, etc. And these things might sound like, oh, yeah, whatever. Yeah, we'll get to it. But these are the underlying reasons for why things aren't getting done right now. Right? And also, I guess I should say, when you have a team that has figured it out, why it's such an incredibly high-performing team, and why some companies are just outperforming everybody around them, because they either have something in there of all these things we're talking about, where they've found the right mix, or they found the right kind of combination of how to get this done. But where I'm going with all this is, we're never going to have a great project plan. We're never going to be able to execute on budget. We're never going to be able to get to where we need to go if we have all these internal factors that are taking our eyes off the ball, right? Because every time I have this and we have a miscommunication and we're trying to grow and you're not understanding what I'm saying, we're not on the same page, and we don't have time to explain it, we don't have all that stuff, we are putting drag on the project. We're putting drag on it. You're slowing me down, right? We're trying to move forward, and to move forward quickly, we have to all be moving the same direction, right? Maybe we're not all at the same speed, but we all got to be, we can't have one person trying to backpedal while everybody else is trying to push forward, right? Because the sum total is we can't move as fast. And today's world is all about being able to move as fast as possible. One last thing, just on the cultural, not necessarily culture, but generational stuff to keep in mind, because this is, I think, I can't come up with a better example of the next generation. So after the millennials come the centennials. And as a matter of fact, the generation after them, who is now 6 years old and down, is called the alphas, okay? But let's talk about the centennials, because they're coming. They're going to come into the workforce, right? They're coming next to, and you need to also, one of the things you should say is, I really look at generations, how they've been educated and what the premises have been and how they've been educated, because it helps me as a manager in budgeting and road mapping so much, understand their premise and where they're coming from, right? Because I get it. I'm Gen X is like a little freak generation. They experimented on us. It's completely different. We're our own thing. I don't have any premise that anybody understands that, so I come out and say, well, I don't know, how were you trained, right? Because I've been globally trained, and I just get it. You can't bring your stuff with you. You just have to come with an open mind and say, okay, what do we have here to work with, right? Let me understand you. So if we're gonna grow, we got to understand you. We got to put everybody into growth mode and go forward. So this is actually a plan for how now children are being taught. It's a workshop style. It's being rolled out to, I think, the majority probably of public schools in the United States. And the workshop style kind of goes like this. This is reading, writing, it works for math, etc. And this is the hour, or it's like 58 minutes or something like that you have with a class topic. And then you see here, if you see how much it's, so basically there's a focus mini lesson for about 15 minutes on the topic. Then there's all this time for being guided in independent work. So all the children are doing their own work independently, and the teacher walks around and does one-on-ones as they can. And then at the end, everybody stands up for like 5 minutes and they do a share and reflect period, right? And they're talking out, they call it sharing out to the class, what they learned during their independent time, or what they found out that day, or what are the things they're still challenging with, etc. So here's math now. This is now my son's math class. They have a warm-up for 5 to 7 minutes. They have a mini lesson for 10 to 12, because that's the entire lecture part, 10 to 12 minutes, okay? Most of us on the phone right now, or on the webinar, that was not the case. We didn't have a 10 to 12 lecture time, right? Then they do a focus statement of their own goal for themselves, 20, 30 minutes for workshop time, and then they share out and talk for their understanding, 8 to 10 in group format. I went to the thing where they rolled this out, or they're at least telling the parents how things are done. I'm in a very diverse area. People's mouths were hanging open, and they were thinking, and also there's not really that much homework because they now put in study centers, so you have time during the day. And people were like, my child will never graduate, right? Like, this is so vastly different from how I was raised. What will we do with this, okay? But you know what? Each generation feels that way about the other generations. So and my point is, break out of your bubble, get there, and start thinking about how, instead of, again, trying to get everybody to be like you, say, well, hold on, how were you trained? And like, it's very interesting, okay? But we got to start thinking about these things because it has been so homogenous for so long. We really do need to expand out, and everybody's always, every ASE thing I ever go to, it's like all about millennials, and the poor millennials in the room are like, they feel like they're like, insects being investigated in front of them. They feel very like, oh, everybody's talking about them. But we have to think this way if we're going to be successful and make it all work together. Because we know from research on high-performing teams, the best high-performing teams come from diversity. We know that. We know that in growth, right? It's kind of like survival of the fittest. The more diversity we have, the greater chance we have, the greater the probability we have of being able to survive. So we need to figure those things out and really do that. So how do we take all that and now get back to, the main question? Do we know how to budget, roadmap, and project management given the landscape I've just given? I'm just, giving you a picture of. Do we know how to do that? Because most of us, what we've been taught is not what would work. If you think about how you've gone about doing your projects, your budget, your roadmap, and then you talk about the landscape I just presented to you, it shouldn't be a surprise that, no wonder it doesn't work. Like, I never thought about it like that. And so what I'm going to present now is the way that this has been being able to, worldwide, a different kind of mindset, which is called Agile, if you're not familiar with it, which is being rapid, responsive, and realistic, right? So Agile came out, it came from software, right? But what's interesting about that is it came from a technical software background about how can we develop software in a faster way, because remember software, or maybe you don't know, but it used to be that you'd have these one big release every, maybe 2 to 3 years. You'd have these big versions come out, and then you'd have this long lag time, and while all this stuff was being developed, and then nothing was out to market. And these guys kind of got together in 2001 and said, we got to stop that. We got to get much faster. We're like, a competitor can come and blow us away, right? We shouldn't be able to do that. Why can't we break it up and get much faster? So Agile Manifesto is the origins. There's an easy read that Microsoft put together. It's just kind of an overview of what is Agile. It's a good one. I'm giving you that. And then so think of it that, so software came up with this Agile process. And then over the last, I probably learned Agile, like 10, 15 years ago. And so was it from a software development, but what it's now become is it's become like the Six Sigma, which came out of manufacturing and then was, applied to everything in business. And Agile now is being applied to everything: product development, product marketing, business, marketing, publications, events. Like, it doesn't matter. It's just a process, right? It's a mindset. So Agile mindset is now what we want to talk about. So it's about how do I be fast to market? And Agile, if I come from this as a methodology, it changes everything. It changes all my budgeting, all my numbers, all the way I'm going to do stuff. My teams, the way I orchestrate stuff. I don't necessarily have a department anymore. I might just have teams. They're rotating people in and out based on all sorts of different stuff. It's very, very fluid, right? And if you had to describe your internal association, the challenge I would say is, would you describe it using the word fluid? Right? And most people would laugh and say, yeah, not fluid, right? And then also, is it responsive? Right? Are we sensing and responding to the market? Are we right up there with our members, constantly sensing and responding about, and constantly taking in data points as to what they don't like and want and need, and actually being able to deliver back products and services in a very quick time to market, place? Some organizations are actually doing that. Many organizations are saying that's what we want to do. That's what we're primed to do now. So the Agile methodology starts with that SMART goal. If you remember, specific, measurable, action, and then time bound, right? We need to do that. So we set that and we say, here's the goal, and we break it into projects. Then we break the project into other pieces. And so it's called sprints. That's coming from, again, the traditional Agile way. We evaluate each day with what's called a scrum. We make adjustments, we execute, and we evaluate, right? We break it down, we evaluate each day, we make adjustments, we execute, we evaluate. We break it down, we evaluate each day, we make adjustments, we execute, evaluate. You see where I'm going? Rinse and repeat, okay? But the key piece here is we break it down. We break everything down into much more bite-sized chunks. So it's some big thing like annual meeting. It's too much to talk about all of annual meeting. We got to break it all the way down. And again, depending on who's on the team, we got to be able to break those things down, okay? Agile also lets you have projects running concurrently, concurrent work streams, but interestingly enough, we need to be far more hyper-focused on the task when we do them. And we'll get to that in just a sec. So I've taken just a traditional marketing campaign, and what I do with my team is like, well, we got to, again, for any campaign we're going to do, we have to agree, again, on what constitutes a campaign. So I have to set the expectations, and I have to say that we are not going to undertake something if the campaign, if we can't define it as a package. And in that package, the definition of a campaign is there's a revenue purpose, there's some amount we can spend, there's a collection of tactics, we have a position and a value proposition for it, we have creative, we have project management, we have measurement. And we're going to take that as our definition, and then we're going to execute it using an Agile methodology, okay? But you notice also project management is just in there. I'm going to kind of side note on and shift over to budgeting. One of the things that, again, in trying to talk about the difference with Agile with budgeting. So traditionally, or this is how most of us are, we have to do an annual budget for our department, for marketing, for whatever department we have. We do an annual budget, and we have to think through all the stuff, and really the projections we're making are based on what we did last year, right? Then maybe we're trying to put in some extra stuff or cost cut or whatever we're trying to do. And we're trying to plan. That's great for what? Growth or maintenance? Maintenance. Because it's assuming that you know the factors that you need to do within a budget period. But in growth mode, you're both sensing and responding, and you're innovating and you're experimenting, right? And one of the big pitfalls I see as these organizations want to budget for marketing automation is what they do is they try to go after buying marketing automation the traditional way that they buy websites or email marketing, which are maintenance tools at this point. And they try to do it as this big capital expenditure in this big year-long plan and this big time frame to figure it out. And they have to do all this due diligence for like 6 months, and they have to have committees and on and on and on. And it's incredibly the wrong way to go. Because what they need to do is be agile. And instead of making, you know why it's the wrong way to do it? Because it's a massive, that's a huge expenditure. And it's very risky. And if you pick the wrong platform, or if you don't have the right partner, hugely risky, tough. Why are we doing it that way? Why not go the Agile way and do a pilot program to set baseline data? Do a pilot program for 3 months, 6 months, spend a little bit of money, but have that money in the budget so you can do the experiment, right? If it works out, then put a bigger budget for later on so that you really have the real numbers and you have the real data. That's an Agile way to now budget for something new that the organization hasn't been doing for a long time. Same thing with like you want to adopt a new event technology, right? Don't go through this long process of analysis to figure it out. See if there's not a way you can speed the whole thing up and be agile and test it out, try it, and then figure it out, right? Test it, try it, buy it, okay? So break it down into smaller chunks. Don't make it such an overwhelming kind of thing. Roadmap it into small chunks that are big, that are, you know, wins as you go. Right? And then when you're prioritizing these things in your budget, always thinking about, are we going to spend money? Because here's the growth mindset. Maintenance mindset is we need to spend money on stuff that internally will make us more efficient. It helps us out for X, Y, and Z. We need something for our current membership, you know, those types of things. One versus need. Growth mindset prioritizes very differently in a budget. In a growth mindset, you're going to be like, look, I know you need, you know, new pencils or whatever at work, but, you know, just deal with what you got, because we need to take every dollar we have and we need to put it in digital advertising because we need to get in front of new people. That kind of idea, right? So if I'm going to prioritize and I'm in growth mindset, it's very different than maintenance. And so when we're budgeting, we need to also think about that. Are we building into our budget the ability to be agile, that we can sense and respond? Because a year is a very long time, right? And if something happens mid-year, and let's say the hurricane happens and we need to respond, did we build in something that we can be agile with what we need to do? Also, same thing. Instead of having a long annual plan cycle, a budget cycle for like a year, break it down into quarters and months, right? So month by month by month, break it in there. Even though you might have to present an annual budget number, in your own Agile budget tool, break it down so you can have that flexibility and you can see, and you should be measuring month over month over month how these things are doing, right? So be able to iterate to that next big thing, right? And then understanding that, again, back to talking about the campaigns, that the definition of it, that every campaign's we have to agree, it has a before, a during, and after, right? And I say that because in an Agile world, we have to also complete the cycle. What most of us do in associations is we spend a lot of time in execution, and that's not true. We spend a lot of time in planning, we spend a lot of time in execution, and the evaluation tries to drop off. Or what we do is, again, we're not doing that on that repetitive cycle of performance, right? Pick out your definition of campaign ROI. So now when I'm doing my budget and now I'm breaking into my project management, I have to constantly be thinking in terms of campaign, right? Because this keeps me agile. What's my overall budget? And then how can I keep moving the budget around so that I can constantly optimize? That's very different than saying, here's my budget, I'm going to do a big spend with another industry, newsletter and buy up all the ad space there for a year, and I sit there, right? That's not how we want to buy and spend our marketing budgets anymore. It has to be a constant, continuous buy and measure and figure it out and change it all the time. So it's very different, not locking into those big contracts, right? That's a more maintenance thing. I'm just going to maintain it. We got to be able to test and try out new channels and figure out what that is. And the time frame for execution gets very, very short. And we're constantly looking and we're testing and measuring all the time, because our fundamental thing is, how do we measure ROI? Input costs, therefore, look at now our budgeting. Cost of software, cost of digital advertising, cost of human labor, right? Printing, travel, whatever. But you notice that we have some new line items in there when we're doing Agile, and this is specific, of course, for growth, for, let's say, membership. We're also putting in human labor because that's important. Because human labor, if we're never measuring human labor, we're not seeing all the inefficiencies of why projects don't get done, right? And then on our campaign output, as part of this kind of budgeting and goal planning and everything else, we need to say, what are we going to measure, right? So here's our measurement piece. And if you see that we're looking at number of contacts, our number of marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, deals closed, new sales, they're all inherently revenue driven, because our whole purpose of going to Agile, as we said, with our, what are the 3 things we're doing? 75% is probably lead gen. So if our campaign ROI numbers don't match up something that's revenue, then we're probably not operating in a quick time to market way, right? And we're not growing, because growth means revenue. Growth means revenue. Growth means I'm putting money out and I'm trying to get money in. It inherently means money. So if our numbers aren't based on anything to do with leads and revenue and dollars in there and things like that, we probably are looking at maintenance, okay? In doing this and running it from a project management side, we got to have a marketing tool that we can use, right? So you need to have a project management tool. Here at Highroad, we use Maven Link. We've just moved to it. But it doesn't matter. It could be SharePoint, Basecamp, XYZ. I don't care what it is, but it's got to be something. And the team needs to all be on the same project management tool. Now, project management is kind of a whole thing now about, is it an inherent skill or is it something that you need somebody external to do? Every organization has to decide that. I think for marketing people, most people have decided that it is an inherent skill within marketing. You're just supposed to have it. But I want to talk about the kind of putting marketing or Agile into action with teams, right? So putting it now into execution and putting it into project management, this is kind of what Agile looks like. So instead of thinking about a department now and I have people within the department to do the work, instead you're scaling out and it's cross-functional by nature, right? You're going to get the best product if it's cross-functional. So we're going to scale leadership of projects across multiple, across a group of people. So first, we're going to KYP, know our personnel. We're going to bring in the right combination of people for a particular project. Okay, I'm going to give you one right now. Let's say we're talking about marketing automation. It can't just be the communications department doing it. You need people from IT. You need people from, maybe marketing, people from whatever it is. You need a cross-functional team in digital. Digital means cross-functional. Okay, so if it's digital, inherently you got to pull from probably different departments. You make one person kind of the project leader. They take point. They work directly with an executive sponsor. They're doing the plan. They're putting it in. Everybody's using the same project management tool, right? And you go through the process we just talked about. Bite-sized chunks. You have sprints of projects that you're doing each week. You stand up each day and you see the team comes together collectively as a little team. You might have 4 of those a day with different teams. You stand up and you find out where everybody is and you do the execute and improve. Okay? And the difference it makes in an organization is incredible. It's incredible because it allows you to have the ability to adjust. Plus, especially for millennials, because they want to do real work. They don't want to wait 10 years and do kind of grunt labor. They want real work. It gives everybody incredible amount of cross-functional ability and exposure and leadership capability, and allows everybody to develop, right? So project management, like I said, it really speeds it up to go to Agile, okay? So then when you're doing Agile project management, all you're looking for is what's my major blocking points? What's going to be the major blocking points that we have to, that's the critical path, right? But we're also not going to get held up on all these things. We're not so like, well, so-and-so didn't give us the thing, so therefore nothing can get done. We're like, look, we didn't get the like we were waiting for our designer to give us the graphic artwork for the annual brochure. We didn't get it. We can't wait. Let's move on to the next thing and we'll come back to it, right? So we're able to adjust to these things and move things around very, very quickly. Also with Agile project management, you're going to put in realistic factors. Some of my favorites are like, hey, Suzanne, we're ready to put in marketing automation. I'm all excited. Like, that's great. Let's do it. And, of course, in the sales process, how long is it going to be? I'm like, we have a 90-day methodology. We've honed it after 4.5 years. It's awesome. You got to commit to it. And they're like, oh, yeah, I know we signed the contract. We forgot to tell you. We've got a board meeting coming up. And then so-and-so's going out on maternity leave. And then they're going to, somebody's getting married. And then we have annual meeting. And, like, it's not realistic, right? None of it's realistic. But everybody wants it in this time frame, and see, we're not setting ourselves up for a win. So Agile, because every week or whatever, we can kind of look and say, okay, what do we have to add in? We can be able to change the project plan, change what we're doing to adjust to these realistic factors. And because it's cross-functional, I can move people in and out much more quickly, right? So if we put all of that together, trying to tie it together, that's how you get the Agile roadmap. And we do the exact same process we talked about before. We identify the big destination of like, okay, we need to grow by 20% in 3 years. And then we're going to actually break that down into goals, into milestones, into projects, into tasks, everything we just put together. And then the one final point I want to kind of leave you with as, here's something. Wouldn't you know it, the research has come out and found out that, in fact, multitasking is actually not very effective. Right? And one of the reasons I think that we are all not doing so well in getting stuff done is not only do we have an attention span of 4 seconds and we're multitasking and we're completely electronically tied into everything, but also we keep changing our focus every 5 seconds. So we're constantly looking at email, we're constantly looking here. It actually doesn't work anymore, and we're getting farther and farther behind in our work. And so what's now coming into practice is to say, I didn't know the opposite of multitask, so I just said unitask. You need to do one thing at a time, heads down, and complete it, and then move on. You need to take care of those kind of rocks, like the big things, and not let, because everything else is like maintenance little, it's a very, it's all distracting, and you can do it, you feel like you're doing a lot of stuff, but in fact, you're not fundamentally moving the ball forward. And so one of the things about Agile is that these pieces are all quick and fluid and meeting, and we're touching base. But when it comes time to do the work, I'm heads down in defined time to do the work. And so I'm fundamentally being able to knock out the work and complete the task completely. Not a little bit, not touch it, completely. right? And I think many of us will agree that our days and the number of meetings and everything else has gotten to the point where we're not effective because, like I said, we don't have enough time to actually do the work, right? So something about Agile, as quick as it is and as fluid and putting it all together, it actually has another component, which is a slow down and focus component in order to really be able to deliver, whatever the product or services you're trying to get back out to the market. So in summary of all of this, looking at all these things of kind of this high level talk about budgets and roadmaps and being able to project manage in today's world, I would ask everybody to go back and just spend a little time on the self-reflection, right? This is something, do I need to get to know Agile? Should I think about that? Is that something that you're right, And what we have coming up for you in our toolkit of the month, this month, is a project maturity assessment tool. And that can kind of get you familiar with how, if you had to grade your own organization on project management, where would you fall in project management maturity, right? That can give you some other tools to say, And then I would go on to say, think about how to create, or ask us, and we'll create one with you. How do we create a budget, a project management, a roadmap framework that's going to fit together in today's world, giving that landscape we talked about, right? So we can set ourselves up for success. Because I think most of us can agree, we just keep getting, everything becomes additive. We keep running more and more and more with more and more stress, and it's like we're not getting anywhere, right? So we need to say, hold on a second, there's a better way to do this. We need to figure it out and apply it, because we need to figure out how, as associations, we can produce more with less stress, right? I'm going to tell you a key right there. You got to fix the email problem. We'll have another session on that one, but email causes associations so much stress, so much production time, so much lost creative brain power time. There's better ways to do it, right? But we need to produce more with less stress, and we need to have better results with greater buy-in from our teams, right? That'll provide a much healthier environment in which we can all thrive. So with that, thank you very much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you on future Highroad U sessions.